are thrilled that you're joining us tonight. And let's travel to the Galapagos, shall we? So I know some of you have already been on several of our presentations, which is awesome. And I'm happy that you are joining us tonight and for traveling with us to the Galapagos. And I just wanted to take a few moments to introduce us and what you can expect today. So just a few introductory items. Then you will get an overview of Explorer Ventures, which is the company that Jennifer represents, as well as an overview of the Galapagos in general. And then we talk specifically on the Humboldt and Tiburon Explorer, which is the two liveaboards that they represent in the Galapagos. And we'll talk about COVID restrictions for Ecuador and the Galapagos and considerations for that. We'll have a Q&A and what the next date for our Traveling Thursday is. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Kevin Smith. He's on the call tonight as well, because he edited our last video that was on St. Lucia. If you missed that presentation, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch it there. That was very informative as well. So thanks, Kevin, for putting that together for us. And we're recording tonight as well. So this presentation, if you need to drop out early, or if you want to give it to someone else who cannot be here tonight, it will be on our YouTube channel as well. And the other item I wanted to mention is our plan now is that we run a Traveling Thursday every other Thursday until early May probably. And the schedule will be sometime next week on our website as well, so that you can refer to it. But please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter in case you are not getting our newsletter, because the dates and the registration links will always be in there. So those of you who may not know Fly and See all that well, there's our team. I got some of them tonight on the call. We have been in business for almost 25 years, and dive travel is all that we do. A combined, none of us are 70 yet, but we have a combined experience of over 70 years and expertise in pretty much anything, anywhere in the world where there's good diving. Over 40 destinations, over 100 resorts and liveaboards worldwide that we work with and partner with. We can issue our own tickets. That means we are IATA appointed, and that means we can control the ticketing details, which is a huge advantage. And then many of you have been either on a group trip that was booked through us or have done your individual travel. We offer both custom group trips and custom individual trips, and then obviously a lot of trips through dive shops as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Cumming. She actually is Canadian, so we're going to give her a big shout out on that. And so Jennifer, I'm just going to say it's all yours, and you can just take the mic now.
Yeah, thanks. My internet is a whopping 400 kilobytes per second. So this may be a little bit delayed. Good. My name is Jennifer Cumming. I work for Explorer Ventures, and we'll go ahead. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as we move into the presentation. Next slide. Who is Explorer Ventures? Well, Explorer Ventures is the company that I work for. I answered an ad to be a boat manager in St. Martin in the year 2000, and that is how I ended up with the company. Since then, I've worked on our boats in the Caribbean. I've been operations manager, and in 2007, I came down to Galapagos because we started a business relationship with an Ecuadorian company, and they wanted a consultant to work with the boat. So since we were going into the relationship with them, I came down to consult. Between trips on the island, between trips on the boat, I stayed on the island. And back then, there were very few real dive instructors here. Most people that were working in the shops as guides barely had open water. There were a few instructors around, but it wasn't the safest type of operation. I ended up teaching some open water courses, some advanced courses, and a dive master course. And I actually met my husband in Galapagos. So I have now been a resident of Galapagos for 11 years and live here with my husband, who is a guide on one of our boats. So that's the very short version of my story. In this picture, you can see our mock-up for what Tiburon was supposed to look like, and then we have below our Humboldt. Go on to the next slide, please. Okay, where are the Galapagos Islands? Well, the Galapagos Islands, many people don't know, they are part of Ecuador. And they are located off the coast of Ecuador and almost directly on the equator. So let's go on to the next slide. Everybody can see the red blob, perfect. So how do I get there? You need to fly to one of the two major cities in Ecuador, Quito, which is the capital, which is located in the Andes, or Guayaquil, which is also one of the two largest cities, and that is a big port city towards the southern part of Ecuador. To get here, how do you do it? Well, you can fly either via Toronto. We don't know when Air Canada will resume their flights again. But before COVID, Air Canada had a nice flight schedule from November on. Let's hope that they return to that when things get back to the new normal a little later this year. But you can also fly on American Airlines through Miami or Dallas. You can fly United via Houston, Delta via Atlanta, JetBlue via Fort Lauderdale to Quito, and you can fly on JetBlue or American to Guayaquil. And from there, you need to spend one night minimum, and then the next day you'll fly on to Baltra, which is very close to Santa Cruz, the island where I am right now, or San Cristobal, which is where Humboldt operates out of. The flights to Galapagos are almost all in the morning, and the flights out of Galapagos are late morning or early afternoon. So to get back home, you're generally looking at taking a red eye or spending another night on the way back out. Next slide. What else can you do? Well, I know a lot of people have very little holidays, and we can't live aboard a lot of time, but Ecuador is a phenomenal country. There is so much to do and see here other than a week on the boat. You can do land tours in Galapagos. On the island of Isabela, you have the second largest crater in the world on the Sierra Negra volcano. The island where I am, Santa Cruz, has lava tunnels. There's Española, which has the winged albatross. There's Floriana, which was the first island with a settlement. And even mainland Ecuador. Quito City is a beautiful colonial city. The Otavalo market is a big trade market. Cotacachi is a city dedicated to produce leather goods. Then you have the volcanoes in the corridor of volcanoes. You have cloud forests, you have climbing, you have whitewater rafting. For a tiny country, it has a lot of diversity. Next slide. So why is Galapagos so remarkable? First of all, the discovery of Galapagos. A lot of people believe in error that Charles Darwin discovered Galapagos. And this actually isn't true. Charles Darwin came in 1835 for 3 weeks to do scientific studies on the coast of Quito. 3 weeks. He was 300 years after Thomas de Berlanga. Thomas de Berlanga was a friar that was doing work for the church, trying to find new canals of new channels of transport. I might go into Spanglish a bit because I speak Spanish most of the time. But he was trying to find new shipping canals and new ways to communicate with the natives or the people of South America at that time. And actually traveling from Panama to discovered Galapagos by accident. So 300 years before Charles Darwin. Why else is Galapagos so remarkable? Well, the landscape in the islands were formed by volcanic
Okay, folks, I think we just lost Jennifer there. I'm very sorry on that. I am pretty sure she's going to join us soon again. That happens when we talk to people that are somewhere in the world where the internet isn't all that great. So I think she's just coming back on here. Yeah, all righty. You go right ahead.
It's taken me 10 years, I think, to get used to the internet here because it's slower here now than when it was in Canada when I moved here. Anyway,
okay, you go right.
Let me wait for just waiting for the screen to come back on. So I was talking about hotspots. So what has happened is the Earth's crust moves and the islands form west to east. So the islands of Galapagos that are in the eastern part are the youngest of the islands. Galapagos is actually at the juncture of three tectonic plates. So here we have the Nazca, the Pacific, and the other one escaped me just at the moment for that dropout. So three tectonic plates moved together, the hotspot was there, and the islands were formed. And we are shifting. My house has cracks in it all the time. So we feel that we're shifting. It's not a big shake or anything, but the islands definitely move. Lots of natural wonders here, the flora, the fauna. The reason that all of you are here right now, the underwater world, and specifically what you see behind me here, which is Wolf and Darwin Islands. The iconic photo that everybody wants to put on Facebook so everybody else knows where they've been diving. Okay, next slide, please.
Jennifer, you turn off your video. That way your bandwidth is probably going to improve and we may not lose you again.
That's a good idea. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next slide then. So let's talk a little bit more about what affects the underwater life. So here we have four converging currents, which are the Humboldt current, the Panama current, the Cromwell current, and the South Equatorial current. So the Humboldt is the current that comes up from Peru, and it's a colder current with a lot of upwellings in it. The Cromwell current comes from the west. It's also a colder current, which brings in the nutrients. The Panama current is our tropical current, which comes in from above. And the South Equatorial current pushes against the Humboldt current. So it is coming from the east. And the seasonal climate change happens for the changing of these currents. So in the colder season, the Cromwell and Humboldt are really strong, which brings all in the nutrients, which bring in the big animals. And then when we get into the warmer season, the South Equatorial current is stronger. It pushes back the Humboldt current. It's a tropical climate. I know people say that Galapagos is cold water diving, but it's not cold all the time, and it's not cold in all its locations. We have a tropical climate, and Darwin and Wolf are considered tropical islands. The average water temperature there is in the mid-70s to low 80s, so it's quite warm. The colder islands that we're famous for are the western islands where the Cromwell current gets really strong and you can dive in really nice temperatures of 60 or sometimes even a little colder to see the iguanas in our winter months, so July, August, September. The northern islands of Darwin and Wolf are quite warm most of the year. Next slide, please. Okay, so here you can see how the currents work. And yes, this is in Spanish. It's from my guide course I took. But you can see the current, the Peruvian or Humboldt current coming up from below. The red, the warm current, the Panama current from above. The South Equatorial current from the east. And then the Humboldt current, which is the one with the long fingers, long cold blue fingers, which is wrapping around the island. And if you see the island on the left, which looks just like a seahorse, that is Isabella Island. The nose of the seahorse is Punta Vincente Roca, where we see the Mola Alexandria, who are relatives of the Mola Mola. And the island below the nose of the seahorse is Fernandina. That is where we dive with the marine iguanas. Those are the coldest dive spots that we have here. Okay, next slide, please. So what can I see underwater? Well, in July to November, there's a very good chance to see what we call the big animal. Sometimes we don't use the real name on board because people think it jinxes it. But July to November, there is a very good chance that you will be diving with whale sharks. These are not small whale sharks like you see in Utila. I dove in Utila after seeing whale sharks for the first time in Galapagos, and I said, what is that? These are pregnant females, some of them not pregnant, but they are the size of semi-trailers. The whale sharks we see in this time are huge. And research shows that they may actually have their young close to Galapagos, but nobody has figured out the exact details yet. We have a lot of scientists here doing research about this. You see sea lions, you see eagle rays and mobilas, schools of mobilas like you see in this photo. The famous diving merino iguanas, the only place in the world where you can see these creatures. And interestingly enough, only 5% of them actually dive. It's the big males that can tolerate the changes in temperature. And they dive so they can go down and feed on the algae. And of course, hammerheads, big schools of hammerheads. Next slide. What can I see on land? Well, the first photo is land iguanas. These big, beautiful iguanas in their various shades of gold. The giant tortoises, which are kind of like Volkswagens. They run rampant on the island. We see them sometimes in the middle of the road here in Santa Cruz. And the fine for hurting an animal here or killing an animal is higher than the fine for killing a person out of interest. You cannot endanger or damage the animals of Galapagos. And then you see over here on the side a fur seal. Next photo. What kind of birds can I see? Well, the bird on the left is the famous frigate bird. That is a male. He is inflating his red bladder there to attract the females. We see flamingos. And then on the right, the very famous animal from here is blue-footed boobies. On our land tours, you will see blue-footed boobies, and yes, their feet are very blue. The bluer the feet means the better their diet. So this is how the males impress the females. They show off that they have very blue feet, which means they are good hunters for the sardines and other fish that they eat. We also can see penguins, which aren't quoted here, but in the Western Islands, we see penguins in Fernandina. When we do the marine iguana dive, we usually see the penguins on the shore. It's very rare you see them underwater, but we do see them. Next slide. So I know really you want to know a little bit more about the diving. We call this a cold water destination just because of the colder current and because of the Western Islands. We dive up to 4 dives daily. There can be very strong currents. A lot of the times we need to swim against strong currents to get down. And the dives are done when the currents are strong, hanging onto the rocks with our hands. We don't have a lot of coral here, on platforms where we wait for the hammerheads to come in. We dive from what we call pangas, which are zodiacs. You can see in the pictures here. So it's a back roll entry. Sometimes it's a negative entry, usually not, but sometimes. And for those photographers, you do the back roll and then we pass the camera into you to go down. We try to enter in sheltered spots so that we can get everybody down at the same time safely. And we do encourage for you to dive nitrox. It's your choice, but the good part of the diving is done between 70 and 80 feet, so 21 to 24 meters. Next slide. One thing that's quite interesting for some of you that may have been to Cocos, they've actually established that there are superhighways between the islands of Galapagos and Cocos and the Ecuadorian mainland. And you can see in this diagram here, there's a lot of movement for the bigger pelagic species between Galapagos, which is toward the bottom of the slide, and Cocos, which is more in the middle. And these are the areas that we're trying to protect right now. The majority of this area is protected, but there are spaces where there's no protection right now. So a lot of people do have questions about this, but there is a superhighway and they've been able to tag and establish that these animals move back and forth. Next slide. So this little drawing shows you when the migrations are strongest. So between March and June, they see most migration of hammerheads back and forth between Cocos and Galapagos. It doesn't mean that there are any less animals, but there is more movement between the animals at this time. We get a lot of questions from people about when the best time is to dive in Galapagos. There's really no good answer for that because everybody has different things on their list. So what we call high season is from July to November. That is the colder water. It's also, we sometimes get these mists, these garuas that pass through. It never rains at that time of year, but we get these mists, so it's a little chillier in the air. And that is the best time to see the whale sharks because of the colder currents running through at that time. The rest of the year, the water is warmer, the seas are calmer, and there are still hammerheads. So there's no bad time to dive in Galapagos. Some people prefer to come in January because the water's warmer. Some people prefer to come in August, September because they can see the whale sharks. Other people don't care about the whale sharks. It's really specific to the individual person what the best season is to go. Just as a note, because everybody loves so much to go April through November, if we ever ask for specials, whether they be DEMAS group specials or individual specials, those will always be December through June. We never offer the specials in high season because we do fill up. Next slide. So where will we dive in Galapagos? Well, all of our cruises start in the central islands. If you see the part that's surrounded by green, right towards the middle of the slide, maybe a little lower, Isla Santa Cruz. This is where we start with our boat, the Tiburon Explorer, and Isla San Cristobal on the right-hand side is where we start with Humboldt. But from that point, both of them dive a day in the Central Islands, do a land tour to North Seymour Island, which is a phenomenal place where you'll see frigate birds, blue-footed boobies, land iguanas, marine iguanas, sea lions, all in a 2-hour land visit. And then we make the long haul up to those 2 islands that you want to see, which are Darwin and Wolf in the north. Yes, thank you, Petra. So Darwin and Wolf, to get from the Central Islands up there, if we're really lucky, we can get up there in about 14 hours. Sometimes with the currents, it takes longer. And because the currents help us get there, obviously it takes longer to get back. So the Humboldt explorer spends 4 days up in Darwin and Wolf and then comes back to the Central Islands and finishes the cruise. The Tiburon explorer does 3 days in Darwin and Wolf and then makes its way over to the west. You see the head of the seahorse I talked about before, and dives there at Punta Vicente Roca on Isla Isabela and Cabo Douglas on Isla Fernandina on the west, where we see the marine iguanas. So yeah, right over there. So that's the difference between our itineraries, and that's the cold place. Okay, this video was taken on Humboldt a couple years ago.
Thank you and salute.
I saw everything.
Unbelievable.
Dolphins.
Well, the number one dive of my life. And it was fun.
And that group, I don't know if you're Canadian, you probably didn't recognize the accent. If you're Canadian and lived away from Canada, you heard it. That group is from Windsor, Ontario, that was featured in our video. Anyway, Humboldt. Humboldt is our original boat. She started service in 2010. All the boats in Galapagos are 16 passengers. So Humboldt is a 8-cabin boat. 7 of those cabins can be 2 beds or 1, sorry, 6 of the cabins, and 2 of them are fixed twin beds. It's got a very ample sun deck area up on the top. They're great boats. They're stable boats, and she is running at the moment. And next Monday she will leave to go into dry dock for a couple months. So as I said, 16 passengers, 8 staterooms. All the cabins have private bathrooms and air conditioning. There are little TVs that have Apple TV. There's stored movies on each of the television, or you can hook up your camera or your computer to the television. Every room has windows. The lower cabins have small windows, but they are windows and not portholes. Then we have the salon on the main deck in the picture here, which is where you eat and relax. We have the sun deck with the jacuzzi on the top deck, and we have a large side deck with a camera table, individual charging stations, and storage areas. Here's a photo of the cabins. In these photos, these are both lower deck cabins. So you see there can be 2 beds or 1 together. Tiburon is our brand new boat. This picture here was taken in October. We ran our first charter on Tiburon September 20th. She is the newest and by far the most luxurious dive boat in Galapagos. She's absolutely beautiful. I know I'm biased because I sell her. I also designed the dive deck along with Peter Hughes. We worked together on it. This boat is phenomenal, and every time I go on board, it does not cease to amaze me. These are pictures of the cabins. On the left-hand side, you have the lower suite. These can all be 2 beds or 1. In the suite in this photo, it's a king-size bed, and there's also a seating area. The lower cabins are huge, and you can stand and look out the windows, and it's a full window. On the right-hand side, you see the main deck cabins. Those are 2 full-size twin beds as well that push together to be a king bed. The main deck cabins have those huge windows that people like. I've slept in both of them. They're both extremely stable, but I prefer the lower cabins because they're just so big, they're so stable, and they're so quiet. But I stayed on the boat on Friday night moving between islands, and there is something to be said about looking out from your bed and seeing the whole sky full of stars at night. They also have televisions in the cabin that have stored movies, or you can hook up your computer or camera to. So in this photo, you can see on the left-hand side is our upper eating area. We serve a lot of the meals up there because people prefer to eat outside, not only because it's more pleasant now, but because of COVID, it gives us a little more air circulation. So we have room for all 16 passengers to eat up, and we also have a full bar upstairs as well. On the right-hand side, you see our very ample dive deck with the camera table. You see at the back there, the white shelves. Those are individual charging stations. So each little shelf has its charging station. So again, we have 16 passengers, but on this boat, we have 9 staterooms, which allows people to pay the single supplement and have their own cabin if they want, because 16 passengers is the absolute limit for Galapagos. There's no way around that. 16 passengers with 2 guides. So it's 8 people per panga with 1 guide. There are private bathrooms, ocean views in every stateroom. There's a huge, partially covered sun deck with a jacuzzi and ample seating, lots of space to sit at the back, at the front. There's a salon area with dining, bar, and entertainment area. And we have the large dive deck with camera tables, camera and gear rinse tanks, and the individual charging stations and storage areas. Just one note here on the cabins. I know that some people worry about lower deck cabins. We have 2 full staircases with full doors. These aren't little emergency flaps. These are full doors. So you go down the main staircase, there are fire doors, and at the end of the hallway on the lower deck, there's another full fire door that you open and a stairway up to the bow. So there are 2 big, wide exits. So why would you choose Explorer Ventures? Well, we have unique packages. We have 2 boats with different itineraries, different starting points, different islands. We're always the best value in liveaboard diving. We're a family-owned company, expertise in Galapagos, 7 other destinations, crew training and qualifications with emphasis on safety. We have the best in the industry small group incentive. If you get a group of 6, you pay for 5 and get 1 free, even for individuals. Booking and cancellation policies, which you can ask Petra about, and innovative low-risk booking terms. So our COVID protocols, we have heightened hygiene practices. You have to have a negative COVID test to get into Galapagos, temperature checks as well. We use masks on board the boat. All the crew have the masks on all time. Bag and shoe fogging is done at the airport, and as well as when you get on the boat. The meals can be done in shifts if we have individuals on board. We also have the outdoor eating areas on both boats. The crews are trained in COVID procedures. We have air purification, change the rinse tanks, and the rental gear is changed, and mouthpieces are changed with every rental. So I believe now we have a short video that Petra's going to show you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the requirements are for Ecuador. To get into Ecuador, you require a negative COVID PCR swab test, so a nasal or throat swab test. This needs to be not older than 10 days, so it needs to be taken within 10 days from the time that you enter Ecuador, and this is just mainland Ecuador. We have a new regulation as of this week that if you arrive with no test, which doesn't happen anyway, that the airline responsible for sending you needs to take you back and pay a fine. So basically, no one is allowed to enter Ecuador now without a negative PCR test. There is no quarantine with a negative test unless showing symptoms. So this would be severe symptoms. And the random rapid tests may be conducted at the airport, but they are concentrating these on the flights coming in from Europe right now. They're not on the flights from the US. So that's mainland Ecuador. As I said before, you need to spend at least one night in mainland Ecuador. To get into Galapagos, you need the negative PCR test not older than 96 hours. So really you have two choices. You can get a test done at home and get to Galapagos within 96 hours and use the one test. If you can't do that, you can get the test within 10 days, come into Ecuador, spend 2 nights because we need 24 hours to get the test done, and then fly on to Galapagos with the second test. So we can help you schedule the test. If you do it on your own, we can't guarantee the time, but we're working with a couple labs right now that assist us doing this. You also need a safe conduct document from the tour operator or liveaboards. This is so that they know where you are for in case that somebody on your flight or else was infected with the virus, that they can track people. So this is basically just a document to get into Galapagos. If you arrive on the day of the charter, we do this. If you arrive early, you get one from your hotel and one from us as well. You sign a health declaration form to say you're healthy, basically, if you translate it. Proof of medical insurance or dam insurance works for this as well. The traffic control card we've had always, it's a tourist card that costs $20 US, and then you pay the $100 US National Park fee when you enter Galapagos.
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you so much for giving us all these details. That's fabulous. And oftentimes, I mean, you've already anticipated a lot of questions that people would have. But if you do have any additional questions now, just jot them in the chat box, and then Jennifer will answer them. While we do that, obviously, this is a picture of why a lot of people want to get to the Galapagos. And what Jennifer didn't mention is, and we assume that this is going to continue with Galapagos, high in demand. If you do want to travel from July through to December, do not wait. Even a year prior may not get you into any of those dates. So a lot of people will book this 2 years in advance to be able to get the whale shark season dates. Another item I wanted to mention is Jennifer has already alluded to that a little bit, that we can arrange complete packages for you. So if you don't just want to do a 7-night liveaboard, but you have 2 weeks, spend a few more days in Ecuador and experience the Otavalo market. Or what a lot of people also do, now sometimes you may need even a little bit more than 2 weeks, is to pair this with Peru and go to Machu Picchu and experience the Andes there that way. So that's another great option, and we're your one-stop shop for that, so we can definitely arrange that. There was also a question submitted to us earlier today, and Jennifer did mention that. Is there an option for for individuals, single people? And absolutely there is. You do pay on the liveaboard an 80% supplement. So it's a little bit more up there because you're basically taking away a space from an additional person. What is the cost of a PCR test in Ecuador? Do you know that?
I do. I know exactly. It's between 88 US and 200 US, depending where you get it and how quickly you need it.
Okay, so the more time you have, the cheaper it is, probably.
Yeah, if you're coming in, if you need it on the way in, we do it one morning and you get it back the next morning before you travel. Those are between about 110 and 130. Okay, so getting out of the Panga looks easy. What is used for getting back in? We've had quite a bit of practice with this because we've been doing this for a while. So basically, there's a ladder to get back in that goes down below the water. But you take off your weights first, pass those up, And the guys that drive a tangle work so hard because they basically take your equipment from you piece by piece, and you walk up the ladder with just the wetsuit and your mask on. So you, by then, you've passed up your weight belt. They take your tank, they take your fins, and you just climb up the ladder. And we've had people of all ages on, so we have made the ladders so that they work. You know, at first we had them too short, so they're good enough. And if you need any help getting up, the guy that lifts the tanks is usually strong enough to put one hand on the back of your wetsuit too and pull. So you don't need to do the flop to get into the boat. You have a ladder to get back in. How cold is the water? Well, I talked a little bit about that. The northern islands are usually between 75 and 80. If you dive Tiburon and dive the western islands at some time of year, that's going to be closer to 60. Most people wear 7 mils between July and November and bring along hoods and gloves. The gloves are more to protect your hands than for the cold. And in the winter, most people wear 5. Our summer, which is your winter, which would be December through May or June. Is there an option to stay a couple nights in Galapagos before or after the liveaboard week? Absolutely, and I would really suggest that you do this. It's easy to add on before or after. I find logistically it makes more sense to add on afterwards. So yes, the nearest recompression chamber is 3 blocks from where I am right now. So we do have a recompressor chamber in Santa Cruz Island if there's a problem. But if you're up at Darwin and Wolf, it will take approximately 9 hours to reach the chamber. So we would send a speedboat up, we have oxygen, and we would bring you to the chamber here. How common are down currents here? This is actually kind of interesting, the answer on this one, because from my experience, the down currents do not happen on the liveaboard. They happen at a site that's a day diving site called Gordon Rocks, which is around the island that I live on. And there are quite a few down currents. Gordon, for me, is a technically more difficult site than Darwin and Wolf. From time to time, there are down currents in Darwin and Wolf. They are not common. So there is the answer to that question. Next question, what level of certification? Okay, this one, I'm a PADI course director, so I can say you should be advanced, but we all know there are people that probably have 2,000 dives and have never achieved this certification because they didn't do the course. So more, I would concentrate on what kind of experience do you have. We recommend 100 dives. Having said that, if you got certified in British Columbia in the winter and did all your dives there and have 50 dives, you're going to be better than someone that's done 200 dives in Grand Cayman. So to answer that in a short way, we have strong currents. You need to be comfortable in rough surface conditions. You need to be comfortable with currents. You need to be somewhat self-sufficient with your buddy because our guides are there to guide. So I hope that answers that question. We do offer enriched air nitrox. You can do it before you go or on the boat. It will not detract from your diving time because it is a short course. Gloves are allowed, but they are also recommended. And it's not because you're going to touch things, because most of the diving is on rocks. As I said before, there's very little coral. So you need the gloves to hold onto the rocks to protect your hands. Oh, next question. We're motoring through these. Would the degree of difficulty be similar to Cocos? I personally have not been diving in Cocos, but from what I hear, I would say yes.
Jennifer, there was one other question just to me directly, if dry suits are recommended.
You know what? It's personal preference. I don't like diving a dry suit in currents because it's hard work to go against the current, which sometimes you have to do. Having said that, in the cold weather, it's nice to have a dry suit. All of our guides wear dry suits. It's really personal preference. A 7 mil would be fine. 5 mil in our summer would be fine, but a dry suit would also be fine. There was one other question that I had from earlier I didn't answer, and that was about rainy season. The wet season here is our warm season, which is December to June, but it's never really wet. We don't get rainstorms or things. Everything passes very, very quickly. Rebreathers. Rebreathers in Galapagos is interesting. We no longer support rebreathers. Our insurance companies don't support them. The Galapagos National Park is not a huge supporter. I believe there are still 1 or 2 boats that have CCR support, but it is not for individuals. To have CCR support, you need to take a charter of the boat. There is also one person that is the local expert on the SORB and everything. He now lives in Florida, but if you are going to do a CCR charter, you need to pay him to come, and he takes one of your cabins. You also have to comply with the 100-foot depth limit, and you have to comply with the time limit, which is 60 minutes on the dive. Which itinerary do I prefer? It really depends. If people want to see big, big animals, then probably the Humboldt, because you have 4 days at Darwin and Wolf in all year, and that is where most of the pelagics are. So, you know, not only are there hammerheads, there's big schools of tuna, there's schools of barracuda, but if you want diversity, then Tiburon is probably a better itinerary because you see the Western Islands. I had a question also about non-divers, and the non-diver pays the same price as the diver because they take a space, they eat the same amount of food, they use the same amount of fuel. But for a non-diver, if you're bringing along a non-diver spouse or friend, there is more to see on the Western itinerary because we do panga rides there. They can go along on the Zodiac, and they will see a lot just being on the Zodiac. People ask, can they snorkel? Snorkeling is actually not considered a dive liveaboard activity, and it's mainly for safety. Our panga drivers are watching your bubbles when you're diving, so they need to watch the bubbles and not watch a snorkeler on the surface. But having said that, there are places we could put somebody in that just snorkels for a few minutes to see, and they will see quite a bit. We also do 2 land tours. I don't think I was really clear on that. One to North Seymour Island with the boobies, frigate birds, and all those things, and one to see the giant tortoises on the highlands of Santa Cruz.
If you pair a trip to Peru, do you need a second COVID test in the middle of your trip? That's a very good question, Kathy, and I would have to double check that. So
I would say if it's an entry requirement for Peru, Peru is a different country. Yes, you would
probably
need the test.
yes. Yeah.
But with the new prerequisites to get back into Europe and to get into the U.S., we are researching more labs that can do the test quicker, or for those returning to the U.S. that can do the antigen test quickly. Are all the dives drift dives? Not necessarily. Sometimes you go against the current because you need to get to the platform at Darwin to see the whale sharks. So you don't always go with the current. We don't dive in the surge because the surge happens mainly on Wolf Island. It can get really choppy close to the rocks, so it's not the safest place. And the panga drivers cannot get in there easily, so we don't dive in the surge. How far in advance is the minimum? You don't always have to book years in advance. What Petra was talking about is the high season, July through November, particularly August through October, books up 2 or sometimes 3 years in advance. This year, because we have people that are worried about COVID, we've had people move to 2022 or 2023. So there are spaces available this year in high season, and we're booking out through 2023 right now. We don't have 2024 on the schedule yet, but so not always years in advance. If you can take advantage and dive this year, we have some excellent dates available.
And I would also say typically January through to June, there's always an option if you look like half a year in advance or so. The other thing that you may want to take into consideration, we do book a lot of groups, so look on our website and you can join into a group. So there may not be availability directly with the boat, but through someone like us who's holding group space, you may be able to get a space that way.
So there are some prime season dates that Fly and Sea has booked. So check and see what you can find for those.
I just briefly want to show you, we're coming up on the hour here, or actually past the hour. I just want to quickly show you on our website, if you scroll on the homepage to liveaboards, you can actually see live availability. You can either do a search for Galapagos, filter by the destination, and then you get all the boats in the Galapagos here. And obviously, let's just say the Tiburon Explorer, when you click on it, it shows you check current availability. And so here you can see, not in very specific detail, but 14 spaces, 8 spaces. And then if you go further into, let's just say, September here, full. There's 4 spaces in September on this boat, 3 here, 1 here. So that gives you an idea of how to look for that. And so on our website, you can check live availability pretty much for every liveaboard that we represent. Most of them participate in this online availability, not everybody. So there's one more question here. Canada requires a negative COVID test. Yes, so does the US now too. And a lot of countries are doing that. So it's fairly new for the resorts and liveaboards in destination. And it is something that they're all working on. Where can the test be done? We are actually compiling a spreadsheet with all the different labs in the different destinations that represent the liveaboards and that do COVID tests. So, excuse me, when you book with us, we will be able to help you find that as well. So I'm going to close it off here. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us directly. We're hoping to see you again in 2 weeks. We are going to be featuring Costa Rica then, and the mainland of Costa Rica mostly, the different diving areas and soft adventure options with Bill Beards. So hopefully you will be joining us again. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website, flyandc.com. Be safe out there. Thank you so much.